This is the first video of Chapter 8, corresponding to Section 8.1 in your Anatomy and Physiology textbook. Chapter 8 as a whole is about the skeletal system and specifically about learning the names of the individual bones and their features. So this is important because a lot of our organs are named for their relationship with bones that they're found adjacent to. When we talk about muscle movements, understanding skeletal anatomy enhances our ability to understand why muscles move as they do. And also, the different features of bones can give valuable landmark information when we're in a healthcare setting. So in this chapter, or this section, we'll be talking about the two broad categories that bones can fall into within the human skeleton. We'll talk about the number of bones in the adult body, why this number varies from person to person, and why adults have a different number of bones than children do. And we'll also talk about some of the general features that bones can have, so then we can look at the features of specific bones in future sections. So we can divide the human skeleton into two broad categories. We have the axial skeleton, which in this picture is colored in beige, and then the appendicular skeleton, which we see here in green. So the axial skeleton is the skull, the vertebra, and the rib cage. So from the front view, skull, the vertebral column, and the rib cage. The appendicular skeleton has four broad parts. We have the pectoral girdle, which is up here, kind of your shoulders. The upper extremity, which is the arm and the hand. The pelvic girdle, which is the pelvis. And then the lower extremity, your lower leg and foot. Typically, adults have 206 bones. There's a really nice chart with a breakdown of this in your textbook. I suggest you take a look at before the exam. There are a few variations from individual to individual. The sesamoid bones can vary in number as bones that are associated with tendons vary from person to person. We also may have little islands of bone in the sutures of the skull, and we call those Wormian bones. Those can vary from person to person. It's also not all that uncommon to have an extra rib or one rib less than normal. And likewise, some adults have one more or one less lumbar vertebra than we typically see. We have 270 bones when we're born, but that number decreases as bones fuse together, and we'll be looking at that, especially in the skull, in a couple videos from now. Bones are complex three-dimensional structures. They have different ridges, spines, bumps, little canals or holes, pores, surfaces where bones move together, articular surfaces. And these different markings are important for us to know and understand, so that way we can talk about specific areas of bones. So when we study bones, we can use an articulated skeleton when all the bones are held in approximately their biological position. And that's done with wires and rods and screws rather than tendons and ligaments. Or we can look at disarticulated bones, which are the bones separate and independent from one another. So we can study the surface features very closely. So here are some of the features of bones that we're likely to see. We can see lines. We can see sutures where two bones fuse together. Crests and ridges are generally the very similar kinds of things. We can have foramen, which are holes either for nerves or blood vessels. Sinuses are larger, irregular shaped cavities. Spines are narrow ridges. Fossae are flat surfaces, flat depressions where bones articulate with each other or move against one another. Crests are like you imagine a crest in geography. It's kind of like a high area. We can have a rounded surface called a head. We can have condyles, which are kind of broad, knobby areas. Tuberosities are an area that is a little bit expanded. So these are some of the terms that we'll be using in the next few sections.